What is the clearest case of living in denial you've seen? So my sister gets married, her husband's family are pretty heavy drinkers, and it's the full range of drinks, beers whenever, mixed drinks, straight hard liquor like vodka, whatever is on hand, and plenty of it, 7 days a week, and all day on weekends, holidays. So her husband's brother, late 20s, hits it a lot harder than even the other people in his family. A full handle of vodka after work every day, kind of hard. 4 or 5 over a weekend, all by himself. So he gets sick, not feeling well, tired, etc. But just puts it down to getting older and maybe not handling his liquor like he used to, but doesn't cut back at all. Once he starts turning yellow, he gets to the doctor, who tells him his liver is shot, full cirrhosis, there's nothing left of it, whatever. He tells the doc he doesn't know why, he doesn't drink any more than the people he knows, it's a mystery, but he'll stop entirely to get put on a list for a new liver. He obviously doesn't stop drinking, doesn't even cut back. Everyone knows it's the drinking and cirrhosis, but he and his family start calling it cancer. It's cancer, so the drinking has nothing to do with it. So he eventually ends up in the hospital full-time because there's no liver for him yet, and his family starts sneaking vodka into the hospital so he can keep drinking. He left the hospital on a slab, and the family starts asking people for money for cancer walks, stuff like that, and not a one of them cut back the drinking at all. My friend has been talking to this man for 4.5 years. They've hung out maybe 5 times and they usually just hook up and he leaves. He only texts her at certain hours of the day because of his work schedule. He never plans dates for them, or when she does try to plan dates he bails. I constantly ask her why she keeps talking to him, and if she really believes they could be something more than once in a while, if even that, fuck buddies, and she said she just really likes him and wants to be with him. I wholeheartedly believe he has a whole wife and kids. Nurse who thought the lump in her breast was nothing important and the open sore appearing was also nothing important, and once it started draining thought it was nothing important despite dressing it daily. Was confronted by coworkers after the smell became so rank it lingered where she went. Stage IV cancer with mets to bones and brain. Died soon after. She was the manager of the oncology unit. Friend diagnosed with diabetes 10 years ago. Has needle phobia, so afraid of pricking his fingers to monitor his blood sugar so doesn't, and just eats healthy. Due to blood sugar fluctuations, gradually goes blind and kidney fails, 3.5 years on dialysis. Then finally gets a kidney transplant. Home again with new kidney, is still afraid of pricking his fingers, and decides he will manage his diabetes by eating healthy, just like he did for the past 10 years. My dismissive avoidant mom was a master of denial. The worst was when she got an abscess in her pelvic area. She was in tense pain, couldn't sit up, was literally white-knuckling a body pillow while laying on the couch, unable to move for a wee ek, and when I'd age 10, would suggest she go to a doctor. It was all, oh no, I'm totally fine. I don't need to see a doctor. This woman literally scheduled an appointment with a specialist and waited 10-ish days for the appointment instead of going to urgent care. She drove herself there in tense pain. The doctor took one look at her and told her to put on a gown and meet her downstairs for immediate surgery. They drained so much yuck from her, and she had to have the gauze packing to heal the crater left behind, etc. It's a miracle she didn't get sepsis. Bonus story. She suddenly became allergic to ibuprofen in her 40s and turned beet red after taking some. Instead of going to the doctor, she went to her hair appointment like normal. Hairdresser refused to cut her hair and made her to go to the doctor. My mom just went home instead and laid on the couch huffing and puffing until the reaction went away. She told me this story like it was a totally sane and normal thing to do. I'm a teacher. I have so many parents in denial about their children's grades or behavior. I once had a kid headbutt me and break my nose, but he couldn't go to recess right then and there, but he's an angel at home. Where he's only ever playing on a tablet. I also have one parent in particular who has 4 children, and all of them have behavior problems, to the point of multiple suspensions or being made to move schools or teachers. And I have to wonder, after 4 children with issues, is it not possible you might be part of the problem? That'd be my father. My mother was manic depressive, as it was called back then. She had several major breakdowns during my childhood. Every time, he'd act like nothing was wrong. She'd be screaming and throwing things, and he'd just try to placate her. It never worked. A couple times, I pointed out that she needed to be committed. He always responded that a person couldn't be committed unless they're a danger to themselves or others. True, but she obviously was. I was terrified of her. Even apart from the breakdowns, She threw rage attacks at the drop of a hat. Long story short, in my 20s I found out that A, they'd had 2 kids before me, and B, she drowned them in a bathtub during a psychotic episode. What I never found out was how she got released or why she was able to conceive me less than a year later. A friend was with me when I found out about B. He told me later that he'd always thought I was exaggerating when I said I'd feared for my life as a kid. I couldn't blame him, it does sound outlandish. After that, it was even more baffling that my father thought we were safe living with her. My mom was complaining about a sister-in-law of her niece who went back to a man that encourages her drug use and physically abuses her. My mom kept calling her so stupid and seemed so much like, I can't believe she is doing this, when she was with my father, who was also a drug dealer, and he physically abused her. She also have a few other relationships with that same dynamic, like, did you forget who you were? I would have pointed it out to her, but it was Christmas and I wasn't in the mood to kill my own vibe. About 6 to 8 years ago on a visit home, my always slightly soft/not quite chubby brother was impressively thin. My dad, the quintessential almond dad, was raving about how proud he was that my brother had lost all this weight, that he packed his lunches and had a physically demanding job and had been working hard at it. I said, "Are you sure?" And my dad was absolutely sure. It was extremely clear to me even then, and came out about 5 years later, that that was the first year of my brother's heroin use. My mom is now 63 years old and has been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis since she was in her early 30s, had 4 children after 30 and declined every pregnancy. She denied she had any diagnosis and went to every chiropractor, Chinese healer, therapist, and naturopath in the area. Even tried acupuncture and magnets. She spent over $100,000 trying to cure her chronic pain that healthcare in my country would have done for free. She spent the last 4 years after I moved out at 18 basically only going from her chair to the bathroom. Didn't even sleep in her bedroom anymore because she was in too much pain. Her feet were swollen and fingers are all crooked due to the arthritis. Eventually developed bed sores due to not moving from her chair. We had to basically carry her to the bathroom. When she stood up, she bled so bad from her wounds it sounded like a dam rushing free. I'll never forget stooping my little brother from cleaning her blood up off the floor and telling him to go to his room, seeing the despair in his face. But she absolutely refused to admit anything was wrong. She was convinced she just had to find that magic cure. She eventually got so bad I was convinced she was going to die any day now, so my brothers and I convinced her to go to the hospital. She accepted and said she'd go the end of the week. She declined so badly that day I had to call an ambulance because she couldn't get off the toilet and was bleeding so bad. I'll never forget cleaning the blood up and helping her change her clothes into her favorite dress because she didn't want to look bad in front of the paramedics. The hospital diagnosed her once again with arthritis, but also severe iron deficiency, 2 wounds that were 10 centimeters deep, patched, and a bacterial infection that could have killed her. She would have died within a week if she hadn't gone. She spent 6 months in the hospital. 4 of them couldn't feed herself, so I would go every day to give her dinner. She was moved to a care home and is still unable to walk, but can feed herself now. She still won't admit out loud that she has arthritis, but is much happier and loves living where she is. A short list of my parents' greatest hits. Asterisk bought me a pride flag patch aged 16 because I told them it was a symbol of God's promise to Noah. Asterisk ignored their teenage daughter's sudden change after turning 18 to having short red hair. Pride flag pleather jacket, binder, and boxer briefs, and an internship at a gay youth org. Asterisk when I later won a gay scholarship to university, they told me it was good I was taking money away from the gays and pretending to be an ally, but that they couldn't drop me at the acceptance ceremony because they couldn't be that near gay people. Get a woman to drop you home, gay men are perverts. The lovely older butch woman who dropped me home was very amused. I have now been living with my wife for 10 years on testosterone. I'm a non-binary lesbian for about 1 year, and we live just down the road from them, so they see us come by. My parents are still convinced that I am straight, single, and a Christian virgin, and just focused on my career and living with flatmates. Oh, and that the drop in my voice is a sign that I'm aging badly and need to buy eye cream. A girl I went to school with. We were on friendly terms many years after school, never got a job, and still lives on governmental pay. She first got 1 child, moved from place to place because she got evicted due to lack of rent. Blew of all her money on crap the moment she got them. CPS placed the child in permanent foster care, and she repeated the same with 2 other children. She is now 40, none of her 3 children have any relationship to her. She still gets evicted all the time, still blows her money on crap, and still thinks she is fine. She is a good mother and all her issues is everyone else's fault. All in all, very sad. A former friend of mine comes to mind. She lives with her husband, 3 kids and mother. The total household income is only $2,000 a month. Rent is $1,500. They are 3 months behind on rent. She says it's odd they won't get evicted. Oh, and the reason for being so far behind it is they bought a second car even though they absolutely cannot afford and definitely don't need it. Glamour photos at $600 a pop for her. Getting nails and hair dyed at the salon once a month. She has no idea how screwed they all are. I feel so bad for the kids. Denial is incredibly useful. So the clearest case I've seen is me and my husband all of 2022. Melanoma went to stage 4. Somehow he had no pain and felt fine until the last week of his life. We had a great time together. He didn't want anyone to know he was sick until he felt sick, and he didn't feel sick until his last week of life, so nobody knew. He went back up north that summer for a few weeks to hang out with his brother and his friends and go see his mom, and had truly a great time. We did a trip to Mexico, and 2 months later he was dead. But my goal that year was to feed him everything he liked as much as possible, and make him laugh. It was successful. Thank you, Denial, for making his last year special. Where people meet someone online, convince their soulmates in love, and send them tons of money. But they've never actually met the person in real life, because they keep coming up with reasons to avoid meeting them at the last minute. Yet continue sending them money, even smuggling cash hidden in cereal boxes or other packages, because the authorities intercepted other transfer attempts. They just don't realize it's a scam. Dr. Phil does tons of these shows. Often the scammers have a profile picture, and so people come on the show to say, "Hi, that person in the profile picture is actually me. That's not my name or my profile. I can confirm you've been scammed." But the victims will still just sit there and be like, "No, that's not true. I know they're real." I just feel so sorry for these people. You're clearly desperate for love and affection, and someone is taking advantage of that. When my father was in the hospital dying, he died a few days later. My sibling and I were taking a break with our mother at her apartment, and we discussed what my father's wishes would be. My mother said she was really hurt because my father didn't name her as his first appointed decision-maker in his advance healthcare directive. My sibling got a funny look, went into the other room, came back with the directive signed by my father showing mother as the first decision-maker, then sibling, then me. Sibling handed it to mother. My mother looked at it and said loudly, "Well, it still hurt." Apparently it was more important for her to take the role of the victim and nurse a non-existent grievance against my father than it was to embrace the truth. I've always kept this in mind as an amazing example of the ability of people to deny reality for their own distorted and inexplicable needs. My sister's daughter is 18, has a very strict diet of yellow or brown foods, her words. She doesn't eat vegetables or fruit, only chicken nuggets, hamburgers, or fries. She never talks to people, goes apeshit if someone talks too loud, gets overwhelmed easy, and cries if anything changes in her home, is totally not autistic. Sister refuses to believe she's autistic in the slightest. When I say she doesn't eat vegetables or fruit, I mean that. She has never once in her life eaten anything green. We went out to dinner with her and my sister once. The restaurant had a bucket of peanuts as an appetizer while you wait for your food. She ate a peanut and my sister was in total disbelief because she never tries new food. My sister has tried to get her to try other foods, but she breaks down screaming and crying. My sister is an amazing cook and a professional baker. Any food she makes is amazing. She always has to make dinner and a separate meal for her daughter. Everyone else can eat steak, grilled asparagus, and mashed potatoes while her daughter comes out of her room to get some boxed macaroni and cheese and goes to eat in her room alone, because if anyone talks too loud during dinner, she gets upset. Unfortunately, my grandfather, both 96, grandmother has severe dementia, can't get out of a wheelchair, in constant agony and barely knows who anyone is. Just sits there, occasionally coming out with a memory from her life irrelevant to current conversation. But at least she's not angry or that type of cognitive decline. Grandpa is nearly blind, legs barely work, but his mind is sharp as a tack. He was an army man, and he cannot accept reality or the situation at hand. He refuses help beyond a carer coming in a couple times a week. My grandma will wet herself because he can't help her the toilet, He almost burned the house down the other day if it weren't for my mom happening by to see them and rescue the house from the flames from his attempt at cooking. He can't even think of his poor wife because he himself is bad enough. It's almost abuse by neglect. We don't know what to do. We want him to get alive and care her, but he goes off on one and cries and manipulates his children into getting his way. He would die before going into a home. And at this rate, he's going to kill them both accidentally, but really what can you do when someone is so stubborn? It's got to be hell to experience, but his sheer refusal to look reality in the face is heartbreaking to watch. I feel like the grandparents I loved died long ago. I'm just watching the echo of their lives playing out in tragedy. If I ever like that, just take me outside, face me at the sunrise and put a bullet in the back of my head. Nobody deserves to die with such little dignity. The one I'm dealing with right now, my wife's grandmother lives with us and is probably never leaving. Basically, we moved to my wife's hometown so we could have her grandmother stay with us for a couple months, while the basement of her house was renovated so she could live down there. Her stairs are no longer a good fit, and she wanted the basement to be redone so she could continue to live as normal life as possible. Her son, my FIL, and his wife also live in the house, so plan was basement first, and then the other floors cause why stop at one floor. Grandmother comes and starts staying with us, and 2 months turns into 3, 3 into 4, and so on. Turns out FIL did not hire a contractor. He had his construction buddies doing everything, which meant he didn't need permits for anything, which is how a year and a half went by. He also decided, cause he's a fucking nitwit, to do the first floor and not the basement. So at the year and a half mark, they finally had the first floor done, along with new siding for the house, and gutted the basement. 2 days after they finished gutting the basement, FIL gets picked up as part of a drug bust and had a metric shit ton of cocaine on him, and has been in prison for the better part of 2 years, and still waiting on a full court date. Come to find out, the drugs was how he was paying for the reno, hence why he was having friends do it under the table. The denial with the grandmother boils down to the fact that she refuses to believe he had drugs on him, and that she'll be able to return home at some point in the near future. I can tell it's starting to weigh heavily on her cause my wife and I are expecting our first child, and she knows we need to start making decisions with our own family. I know this seems like a lot. I promise this is quite literally the tip of the iceberg with where her denial is at. If I wrote out everything she's in denial about, just from the past 2 years, it would end up on the NYT's bestseller list. My Nana over the past couple of months. For context, she is the most selfish person I've ever met in my life, and I'm convinced she has some sort of sociopathic disorder because it's not normal. My grandpa passed away on Wednesday from terminal cancer. I'm not super close to him, so honestly I'm not really affected by the whole situation. We've known for months that he's terminal. It's not been a sudden thing. My dad, his son, and an only child, basically found out today that they had prepared basically nothing for his death, had not talked about a funeral, had not taken measures to make the transfer of assets to my nan any easier, not told my nan where any of his important documents are, nothing. She didn't even know whether he wanted to be buried or cremated. My nan has basically been in denial this whole time. Anytime my dad tried to bring anything up with my grandpa, she would shush him and tell him not to talk about it. She's been carrying on as if everything is normal, to the point she was getting mad at my grandpa for not eating properly and sleeping a lot, as though he's not literally dying. Would try to make him do eat takeaways and heavy foods like normal for their weekly treat, even though he could hardly swallow, and refuse to have a hospital bed in her house because of the aesthetic would be wrong, and it would look terrible apparently, as though that matters. In a way it's kind of sad, and you could argue it was a way for her to cope, but she is such a selfish person that it wouldn't surprise me with how she is known to be if it was all just because of it being inconvenient to her to think otherwise. Also potentially just her refusing to do anything other than continue as normal, as she acts like her entire life is a show and everything revolves around her, so she couldn't possibly do anything otherwise. It's as though she thought if she just pretended everything was normal, things would be normal, which is obviously not how things work and is a super childish mentality for someone in their late 70s. The whole process has been baffling, and the worst is how much of an impact it's had on my dad and his mental health. It's taken a huge toll, and it's made me very angry with my nan for how she's not been sympathetic or caring to my dad at all. My grandpa was by no means a saint either. He was far from a good father to my dad and held a lot of awful, bigoted viewpoints that I strongly opposed, but he had never done anything terrible to any of us, and put up with a lot of shit from my nan over the years. I think the very least he deserved was a shred of care and compassion from her in the end. Even worse, because she wasn't even home when he died. She'd gone out to the shops, so he died completely alone, which I just think is so sad.